The world under heaven. There are many in the world who apply themselves to some method or technique, and they all believe that what they possess is unimprovable. But in the end, where among them is what the ancients called the art of the course? I say, there is nowhere it is not. But then you may ask, whence does the spirit of sagely holiness descend? Whence do the illuminations of kingly wisdom emerge? I answer, that which produces a sage, that which completes a king, both have one and the same origin. He who is never separated from his source is called a man of the heavenly. He who is never separated from the seminal quintessence of vitality is called a spirit man. He who is never separated from his genuineness is called a consummate person. He who regards heaven as his source, virtuosity as his root, and the course as his gate, alive to the portents of every transformation, is called a sage. He for whom humanity is the stuff of beneficence, responsibility the guideline, ritual the normal practice, and music the source of harmony, everywhere exuding compassion and humanity, is called an exemplary man. But to use laws to define proper roles, to regard stated duties as the standard of evaluation, comparisons as the test of performance, and verification as the only decisive factor, viewing these as 4 hard and fast categories, 1, 2, 3, 4. This is no more than a way for the government officials to keep order among themselves. Still, if they are unvaryingly committed to their duties and prioritize the feeding and clothing of the people, regulating the periods of plowing and leaving fallow, storing up the surpluses, always keeping in mind the weak, orphaned, and widowed, then even here there is some guideline for nourishing the people. In contrast, however, how complete the ancients were. They combined the spirit with the illuminations, coupled heaven with earth, nourished the 10,000 things, and brought the world into harmony, their bounty extending even to the ordinary folk. They understood the fundamental principles and could also link them to the derivative standards. Unobstructed above, below, and all around, they connected up all that surrounded them, operating everywhere, in both the large and the small, in both the subtler matters and the coarser ones. Much of their wisdom, as embodied in principles and standards, can still be found among the scribes handling the old regulations and inherited traditions. And many of the gentlemen of Zhou and Lu still have some understanding of that part of it preserved in the classics of the Book of Songs, Book of Documents, Book of Rites, and Book of Music. The Book of Songs guides their wills, the Book of Documents guides their handling of affairs, the Book of Rites guides their behavior, the Book of Music guides their harmonizings, the Book of Changes guides their yin and yang, and the Spring and Autumn Annals guides their apportioning of roles and duties. Their principles are scattered throughout the world but firmly established in these central states, so that now and then the scholars of the various schools will commend them and take them as their guide. But the world is presently in great chaos. People no longer understand real sagehood and worthiness. The courses they practice and the virtuosities they attain no longer form a unity. Many in the world congratulate themselves complacently for their insight into some single aspect of it. It is as if the ears, eyes, nose, and mouth each had its own understanding without being able to interconnect. This is how the skills of the various schools each excel in some part of it, each of which is useful at a certain time. But they are partial and incomplete, nook and corner scholars only. They may try to judge the beauties of heaven and earth, analyze the guidelines for all things, and investigate the comprehensiveness of the ancients. But very few of them can fully encompass the beauty of heaven and earth or take the measure of the richness of sagely spirit and kingly illumination. For this reason, the course allowing one to be inwardly a sage and outwardly a king is obscured and unclear, blocked and unexpressed. Each man in the world now fashions his own technique out of whatever part of it happens to suit his own desires. How sad! The various schools go forth without returning, making it impossible for them ever to come together. These latter-day scholars are unfortunately unable to perceive the purity of heaven and earth or the total system of the ancients. It is their arts of the course that will end up tearing the world to pieces. To remain free of extravagance though born in a decadent age, not wasteful in the use of any of the 10,000 things, making no display in the observance of one's delineated obligations, rigorously disciplining oneself as if with rope and cords, and taking upon oneself all the troubles of the world. These were some aspects of the ancient art of the course. Mosey, and Chin Gully got wind of them and were delighted. But they went too far in what they did and complied too closely in what they kept themselves from doing. They began an anti-music campaign, classifying it as a form of frugality in expenditure. In life there was to be no singing, and in death no ceremonial attire. Mosey wanted to extend love everywhere equally, bringing advantage to everyone, and also rejected warfare. His course was to eschew all anger. He was fond of learning and well-informed, but his emphasis on uniformity differed from the former kings, so he slandered the ancient rituals and music. Now, the Yellow Emperor had his Xianqi Symphony, Yao his Dazhang, Shun his Daxiao, Yu his Daxia, Tang his Dahua, King Wen his Biang, and King Wu and his brother, the Duke of Shou, together created their martial music. In the ancient mourning rites, noble and base each had their respective procedures, superiors and inferiors divided by rank. The Son of Heaven was buried in 7 nested coffins, the feudal lords 5, the great officers 3, the knights 2. But now Master Mo would have no singing in life and no ceremonial attire in death, making a 3-inch thick coffin of paulownia wood with nothing enclosing it the enforced standard for everyone. I'm afraid that to instruct people thus shows no real love for them, and to put it into practice personally certainly shows no real love for oneself. This does not mean Mosey's course was a complete failure. But people sing and he condemns their singing, they cry and he condemns their crying, they make merry with music and he condemns their music. Does he really have any fellow feeling for them? To be labored in life and then neglected in death, this course is excessively dry, and being so difficult to put into practice, it just brings sorrow and worry to the people. I fear this can never be used as the course of the sage. The people of the world cannot endure such a thorough rejection of what is in their own hearts. Although Mosey himself may have been up to the task, what use is that for the rest of the world? Thus isolating himself from the world, he was far from true kingship. But Mosey praised his course, saying, "In olden times when you diverted the great flood, he channeled the rivers to reach the 4 barbarian tribes and all the 9 provinces, creating 300 major waterways, along with 3,000 large streams and numberless small ones. You took up the shovel and basket with his own 2 hands, joining and interconnecting the waterways of the world until the down was scraped off his hams and the hair off his shins, drenched in extreme rains, hair raked through by violent winds. Thus did he bring security to all the nations. He was a great sage, and yet he was willing to labor his body for the world like this." Such words caused many of the later Mahists to clothe themselves in hides or coarse fabrics and to shoe their feet in grass or hemp sandals, never resting day or night. They thought self-torture was the ultimate achievement, saying, "Anyone who can't do the same is not following Yu's course and is not qualified to be called a Mahist." Xiangli Qin's students, Wu Ho's disciples, and the southern Mahists such as Ku Hua Ichi and Deng Lingzi all recited the same Mahist canons but disagreed and argued to the point of calling one another heretical Mahists. They criticized one another with disputations about hardness and whiteness, sameness and difference, answering back to one another with words as incompatible as the odd and the even. They considered their great pontiff a sage, willingly making him their lord and master, each hoping to succeed him. It still goes on down to the present day. Mod and Qin Huali had good intentions, but they went about it in the wrong way, causing the later Mahists to insist on doing nothing but torture themselves, goading one another on with their bare hams and bald shins. This is indeed the best kind of disorder, but the worst kind of order. Nonetheless, Mosey was truly one of the most outstanding persons this world has seen, the likes of which cannot be found today. Even when worn out and completely depleted, he never gave up, a man of genius, perhaps? Unbound by conventions, unadorned by possessions, undemanding of others, not hostile to the mob, purifying the mind with the aspiration that all in the world enjoy peace and security. Not stopping until both oneself and others have enough to nourish themselves with. These were some aspects of the ancient art of the course. Songxing and Yiwen got wind of them and were delighted. They wore caps in the shape of Mt Hua as their emblem and based their interactions with all creatures on a policy of tolerance and non-interference. They spoke of the mind's ability to accept all things, calling this the cultivation of the mind itself, which would enable people to get along with one another happily and bring concord to all within the 4 seas. They would politely suggest that everyone establish this as their guiding principle. They said there was no disgrace in being insulted, wanting thereby to liberate the people from contention. They prohibited military aggression and called for universal disarmament, hoping thereby to save the world from warfare. They took this teaching all around the empire, counseling rulers and instructing the commoners. Although the world did not accept them, they insistently clamored on without giving up. Hence, it was said that although everyone, above or below, was tired of seeing them, they still managed to force their way into view. But they did too much for others and too little for themselves. They would say things like, "It is enough if you would be kind enough to give me even 5 measures of rice. For I am afraid that you, my master, will not have enough to eat your fill. As for your humble servant here, although I may go hungry, I will in any case never forget about the welfare of the world, and day or night I will not rest in my efforts. Or is it really so necessary that I survive? Would I try to put on such airs as if I alone were the man who could save the world?" They would also say an exemplary man does not make strict demands on others, nor impose his personal will on things. They held that anything not beneficial to all the world was not worth knowing. Their external practice was to ban military aggression and encourage disarmament, and their internal practice was to thin out their own passions and desires. In all they did, large and small, coarse and fine, their practices reached just this far and no further. All-embracing and nonpartisan, unstrained and unbiased, unhesitating but without any fixed direction, going forth to things without secondary considerations, ignoring all calculations, uninvolved in any clever schemes, choicelessly moving along with things, these were aspects of the ancient art of the course. Peng Meng, Tianpian, and Shen Dao got wind of them and were delighted. They began by equalizing all things, saying, "Heaven can cover things but cannot support them. Earth can support things but cannot cover them. The great course can encompass things but cannot distinguish between them." They knew that each thing had something acceptable and something unacceptable about it, and so they declared to make a choice is to lose the all-pervading. When any one thing is taught, something else is blocked out. But the course excludes nothing. Thus Shen Dao abandoned cleverness, rid himself of any personal position, and instead followed along with whatever was unavoidable. Letting all things flow on was for him the guideline of the course. He said it is not clever to be clever. It is only because a person aspires to cleverness that dangers beset him. Unashamed and self-reliant, accepting no responsibilities, he laughed at the world's esteem for the worthy. Unconstrained and unattached, undertaking no moral practices, he critiqued the world's high regard for sages. By pounding and hammering off all his sharp protuberances, rounding himself off, he was able to roll and swirl along with anything that came his way. Abandoning both right and wrong, he managed to avoid entanglement. Unguided by cleverness or calculation, ignoring the before and after, he simply towered alone in his place. Moving only when pushed, proceeding only when pulled, he was like a twirl in the breeze, like a spinning feather, like a grindstone rolling on, complete, rejecting nothing, making no mistakes whether moving or at rest, free from blame. For what reason? An inanimate object has no worries about establishing itself and does not get entrapped by the application of its cleverness. Neither its movement nor its stillness can ever stray from the guidelines, and thus it remains forever free from praise and blame. Hence, he said, just become like an inanimate object. There is no need for worthies or sages. Indeed, a clump of earth never strays from the course. The ambitious achievers would laugh at him, saying, Shen Dao's course is no practice for the living, but it is a perfect guideline for the dead. In the end, he was regarded as merely an eccentric. Tianpian was the same way. He studied under Peng Meng and learned from him the estual of all positive teachings. It was Peng Meng's teacher who said the ancient men of the course simply reached the point of considering nothing either right or wrong. Their ways were like a passing wind gusting by. How can they be described? These men insisted on doing the opposite of what others do, presenting to men's eyes no achievements worth beholding, but still they had to round themselves off. What they called the course was not really the course, so even what was right in their words could not but turn out wrong. Peng Meng, Tian Pian, and Shen Dao did not really know the course, but they had all heard something of its general overall character. Regarding the hidden root as the finest quintessence and its manifest reifications as the cruder part, regarding accumulation as an insufficiency, dwelling tranquilly alone in the company only of whatever forms of spirit and illumination may come, these were some aspects of the ancient art of the course. Guan Yin and Lao Dan got wind of them and were delighted. They founded their way on the constancy of non-being and centered it in the supreme oneness. Externally, they had the appearance of pliant weakness and self-deprecating humility. Internally, it was the empty void that leaves all things unharmed, which was their firmest reality. Guan Yin said, "When nothing dwells within yourself, the forms of all things manifest in you naturally. In motion be like water, in stillness like a mirror, in responding like an echo. Vague and ambiguous, as if not really there. Still and quiet, like something transparent and clear. To merge with it is to form a harmony, but to try to gain something from it is to lose it. Never precede others, instead follow behind them." Lao Dan said, "Know the male but hold to the female, be the ravine of the world. Know the unstained but hold to the disgraced, be the valley of the world. Everyone else chooses to be the first, but I choose to be last. This is called accepting the filth of the world. Everyone else chooses to be full, but I choose to be empty, for it is because I store up nothing that I have more than enough, like a range of rolling hills stretching on before me, more than enough." His personal demeanor seemed unhurried and careful to waste nothing. Free of deliberate activity, he laughed at the skillful. Everyone else sought to get what they wanted, but he found his completeness in the indirect twists and turns, saying, "Somehow or other it will work out all right." The depths were his foundation, the cords of restraint his regulating thread, for he said, "The hard will be smashed, the sharp will be dulled." He was broad-minded and tolerant with all creatures, never slicing his way into the domain of others. This can be called reaching the zenith. Indeed, Guan Yin and Lao Dan, these were truly the vast and broad genuine human beings of olden times. Blank and barren, without form. Changing and transforming, never constant. Dead? Alive? Standing side by side with heaven and earth? Moving along with the spirits and illuminations? So confused, where's it all going? So oblivious, where has it all gone? Since all the 10,000 things are inextricably netted together around us, none is worthy of exclusive allegiance. These were some aspects of the ancient art of the course. Zhuang Shou Zhuangzi got wind of them and was delighted. He used ridiculous and far-flung descriptions, absurd and preposterous sayings, senseless and shapeless phrases, indulging himself unrestrainedly as the moment demanded, uncommitted to any one position, never looking at things exclusively from any one corner. He considered the world sunken in the mire, incapable of conversing seriously with himself, so he used spillover goblet words for unbroken extension of his meanings, citations of weighty authorities for verification. Words put into the mouths of others for broad acceptance. He came and went alone with the quintessential spirit of heaven and earth, but still never arrogantly separated himself off from the creatures of the world. For he rejected none of their views of right and wrong and thus was able to get along with worldly conventions. Although his writings are a string of strange and rare gems, their intertwining twistings will do one no harm. Even though his words are uneven, their very strangeness and monstrosity is worthy of contemplation. For his overabundance was truly an unstoppable force. Above he wandered with the creator of things, below he befriended whoever could put life and death outside themselves, free of any end or beginning. He opened himself broadly to the vastness at the root of things, abandoning himself to it even unto the very depths. He may be said to have attuned himself to whatever he encountered, thereby arriving up beyond them to the source of things. Even so, he was able to respond to every transformation, and thus his writings have a liberating effect on all creatures. The guidelines within them are undepletable, giving forth new meanings without shedding the old ones. Vague, ambiguous. We have not got to the end of them yet. Huishur had many theories. His writings filled 5 carts. But his course was uneven and mottled, and his words wide of the mark. His thinking ranged through all sorts of things. He said, "The largest unit has nothing outside it. I call it the great unity. The smallest unit has nothing within it. I call it the small unity. What has no thickness cannot be piled up, and yet it extends for 1,000 miles. Heaven is as low as earth, and the mountain as level as the lake. Just as the sun slants as soon as it reaches high noon, all beings start dying as soon as they are born. Within a great sameness, there can be further subdivisions of sameness and difference. These are called small sameness and small difference. But all things are ultimately the same and also ultimately different. This is called great sameness and great difference. The South is both bounded and boundless, so one can go to you today and arrive yesterday. Linked hoops can be unhooked. I know the center of the world. It is north of the state of Yen, which is in the north, and south of the state of Yu, which is in the south. Love all things without exception, for heaven and earth are one body. Huisher used these statements to make a great display in the world, showing them off in debate, and all the debaters in the world shared his delight in them, adding: Eggs have feathers. A hen has 3 feet. The state of Ing possesses the whole empire. A dog can be deemed a sheep. A horse lays eggs. Frogs have tails. Fire is not hot. The mountain comes out of the mouth. The wheel does not touch the ground. The eye does not see. Pointing never reaches. Reaching can never end. A turtle is longer than a snake. The T-square is not square. The compass cannot make a circle. The chisel does not surround its handle. A flying bird's shadow never moves. A speeding arrow in flight is sometimes neither moving nor at rest. A puppy is not a dog. A yellow horse and a black cow make a total of 3. White dogs are black. An orphan colt has never had a mother. If you remove half of a foot-long stick each day, it will not be depleted even after 10,000 generations. The debaters responded to Huisher with these propositions, which kept them busy to the end of their days. Huan Tuan and Gong Sun Long were debaters of this type, covering over what is in people's hearts with their embellishments and altering their ideas, able to defeat their mouths but not to convince their hearts. This is the trap in which all such debaters get stuck. Huisher day after day used his cleverness to debate with others, accomplishing nothing more than the creation of a spectacle along with the other debaters. This is all it amounted to. But Huisher thought his eloquence was the most valuable thing in the world, saying, "Are heaven and earth any more magnificent? I have this heroic power in me without even relying on a past tradition." In the south there was an odd man named Huang Liao who wanted to know why heaven above did not crash down and why the earth below did not collapse underfoot, and the reasons for the wind, rain, thunder, and lightning. Huisher did not hesitate to answer, responding without even thinking, giving a comprehensive explanation of it all. He talked without rest, loquacious, unstoppable, and still he thought it was not enough, so he supplemented it with even stranger ideas. Since it was really all about opposing the views of others so that he might earn fame for defeating them, he was unable to get along with the mass of men. His virtuosity was weak, but he forced his way heavy-handedly through things, so his path was in the end a dark one. Viewing Huisher's skills against the course of heaven and earth, they look like the busy labors of a mosquito or a fly. What use are they to other creatures? That uselessness would still have been perfectly acceptable if only he pushed all the way to its conclusion his idea of oneness, which is to say, if he had valued the course a bit more. He was so close. Instead, Huisher found no peace in it even for himself, scattering himself unceasingly into all things, ultimately gaining nothing more than fame as a skilled debater. A pity. Huisher's talents were fruitlessly dissipated running after things and never returning to himself. He was like a man trying to silence an echo with shouts or to outrun his own shadow. How sad!